ABBA. Questions and answers. January 27, 2019. In resonance in the Agape heart of each person, in silence and in the presence, I greet each one, in his eternity as in his ephemeral, in what he presents himself, in what he gives himself and welcomes himself, in life and on this instant. On this instant, beyond our presence and our one resonance, there will be only a few words, except to answer the few questions that arise in the field of your experience and consciousness in these days. The essential goes well beyond the answers given to these few questions, but promotes the Agape resonance between each heart present, at this very instant. Here are the questions or testimonies. Question. What is it, to embrace and give yourself? How can we do that, even if there's nothing to do? Because if I can't do it, I don't know. To embrace and give oneself, also called sacrifice and self-giving, corresponds to the installation of the four pillars permanently within the ordinary experience. These four pillars, mentioned a long time ago, allow us to position ourselves effortlessly and without will in the present moment. Giving and embracing oneself, as well as giving and embracing, does not depend, as you said, on any knowledge or action, since this is natural and anterior to this world as to everyone else. There is nothing to hunt and, I would even say, to evacuate or refute at this time, but simply, as has been said, not to be stopped, neither by your body, nor by the world screen, nor by any circumstance of your life. To welcome without thinking, to welcome without discussing everything that can be experienced at the moment, that it concerns thoughts, that it concerns situations, events and relationships. Transparency is about crossing over. Laziness here corresponds to the path of childhood and simplicity, which welcomes the whole moment, without reference to any past and without any projection into a future. This was called the point of view a few years ago. Of course, the person's point of view can never cross over. It is indeed the person whom we must not leave, but let be without intervening with any consciousness whatsoever, in any event, in any relationship as in any lived situation, the important thing being to welcome him before gesticulation and even before understanding. This dynamic of giving as well as this dynamic of embracing, installs, by their reciprocity and complementarity, the present instant, of itself, and then discover as in truth what the apocalypse means. The lighting of the light illuminates what you look at, as soon as what is looked at is not grasped or frozen by your mind, by your emotions or by any posture whatsoever. This has been called the crossing. Of course, it is evident that each of us is going through a profoundly different experience at this time. First of all, we must accept the principle that everything and every element occurring on the screen of consciousness does not have to be justified or explained, but rather crossed. Whatever the harshness and whatever the difficulty, it is only the erasure of the person himself that allows the crossing, because from your person, as you say, you don't know, and you can't do. As long as you believe you can do, as long as you believe you need to know, you are not free of initial conditions. But love, Agape's truth, knows no initial condition, except simply to disappear from oneself, to disappear from the self, and to accept to be crossed by whatever element it is, in order to be effectively, if I can say so, on the other side. On this other side is Agape. This requires neither the very definition of the word Agape, nor even ABBA, but simply that two hearts begin to resonate in phase. Whether it goes through social networks, whether it goes through chance encounters or scheduled encounters, all the circumstances of the encounters, wherever they are conducted, on your inner screen, physically or virtually, do not change anything to the result, as soon as the two have faded away to perform the miracle of one thing. This happens in countless brothers and sisters and, of course, it is not yet happening in a sufficiently extensible way, so that every presence and every consciousness on earth is lucid, and in this truth. There is indeed only one collective event, touching and astounding all the consciences present on earth, which can happen, if I can say so, to this state of fact, to this state of understanding and experience, and which depends neither one, nor on the other, neither ABBA, nor on earth, nor on heaven, nor on whales singing, but on the common resonance of all that is generated within the instant. However, if this instant is colored by the presence of the person, it does nothing to help the unfolding of the collective process, its actualization within the visible, as well as within this densest dimension where you are still posed. Silence. Question. How can we manage the duality of this world where everything we live in is nothing more than a great illusion, created by the imprisonment established in this matrix? How to live in the essence and where to find the truth in the darkness we live in? How do I know if I live in the essence or if I live a lie created by the ego that wants to deceive me with a false reality? Beloved, it is precisely, as you affirm and certainly live it, in the real vision of the darkness of this world, of its falsification, of what has been called its simulacrum, that it is crossed, as soon as you do not grasp it, as soon as you do not claim anything about it, but also when you accept it, to give yourself to it in order to let it cross your path and discover yourself enlightened. It is through the cessation of the activity of ordinary consciousness, as with any action related to the supramental, that truth unfolds. The truth is not in consciousness, but in what precedes consciousness. Whatever the harshness of what is seen and observed, it must be crossed in the same way, with the same liveness, to see precisely, as you say, that all this is only an illusion, a vast theatre scene, something that passes and will never last forever. This disruption of consciousness occurs at the moment when you actually drop everything, and, above all, in an intimate way, any demand or claim to live within a complete individuality within this world, as within any presence. The dream of individuality is, for the one who lives the truth, is not a dream, but a nightmare from which we must wake up. Alas, as long as you remain inscribed and well inscribed in any consciousness, whether it is the ephemeral consciousness or the so-called consciousness related to the supramental or the body of eternity, you cannot become one with the light, because you can only see the illumination of the light, which nevertheless comes from you, which illuminates the theatre scene, and which does not allow you to cross it, but I repeat it, simply to enlighten it. It is only by accepting this insight and accepting to go through you with what is enlightened, however violent or harsh or easy it may be, to oppose nothing and to acquiesce. This acquiescence is in fact, in a way, the key to Agape. Whether it happens between two beings, between a being and a situation, in a real or virtual way, does not change anything. It is, in a way, a positioning within the instant moment, in the eternal present, in what was called Hikeknungs, that realizes the fusion of the ether in you. The fire has already been activated. Knowledge and vibrations have traveled through many bodies on this earth. You are countless. However, it remains for you to let everything that has been experienced in the same way pass through, not to refute it, not to deny it, not to hide it, but really to pass through it and appear in the nakedness of love, in the nakedness of truth. He who lives his essence can only laugh and smile at himself in every minute. He cannot be fooled by the sufferings, he cannot be fooled by the circumstances of this world, and yet it is through them that the light is shed and that he sees for himself that, whatever the chaos of the world, in him, as has been stated for many years, the smile grows, joy grows, and the eternity of this naked love called Agape manifests itself. So then, as long as you yourself are stopped by your own questioning about the circumstances of this world, its duality and illusion, then you cannot cross it, because in a way, you stop it in yourself. To stop is not to cross, to light is not to cross. What is enlightened is dissolved by the light itself, as soon as your gaze accepts and your conscience effectively accepts to accept it without reticence, in a state of grace that is revealed as soon as it is accepted. And this state of grace becomes the permanent grace of your smile, your life and your eternity, present right here through the simulacra of the ephemeral. The world screen no longer alters anything, in your divine presence or in your divine absence. It is precisely your posture and your positioning within what is beyond eternity, in this eternal and ineffable emptiness, that the light continues, no longer for you, but for the whole of humanity, bringing, As you well suspect, for everyone, the same question. Since everything is false and since all this is falsified, manipulated and amputated, can I correct it or is it enough to see it? It will always be the same question, and it concerns the balance, if I can say so, of the way in between love and suffering, between love and fear. Love cannot experience the slightest suffering, love cannot experience the slightest fear, for the smile and laughter witnessed by countless brothers and sisters who have already been living it for many months, is the most formal proof of this. He who lives the truth knows he is true. He does not need concepts, he does not need words, he declares it in his own way, in his conscious co-creation, but has nothing to justify his presence, has nothing to justify his smile, and that only the heart knows, the head will never succeed. Silence. Question. Can the highest consciousness, for example, the consciousness of Christ, Buddha and others who have crossed this earth today, be here in another consciousness, dedicating themselves to the liberation of this earth and all the essences that have been imprisoned here? Beloved, the way the question is asked clearly shows that there is still a form of fragmentation within the person asking the question. Seeing Christ or the Buddha or any great being of this earth as external to you and inscribed in a history, is not really the truth. The presence is active in the instant moment, it does not need to have taken place 2,000 years ago or to occur in a very distant past to be crossed today. Christ is you, Buddha is you. In the same way that Christ said I and my Father are one, in the same way you must recognize this presence in you and not seek it through another consciousness. Because ultimately there is only one consciousness. As you express it, there is still within you the abnormal but real perception, experienced by everyone at this moment, of being confronted with these notions of multiple consciences, these archetypes, these models, so that they are all crossed and are no longer fixed elements within a history, within a plan of liberation which, in the end, for the one who is liberated, has never existed. For this world is a dream, it has no more consistency than the sufferings displayed there, than the resistance of all the brothers and sisters who are not yet free from the illusion of being a person, a story, or having to free anything. Of course, there is a collective history. It is the one that has been replayed since May of last year, and allows everyone to place themselves in the ideal place, whatever their appearance, to cross what has not yet been crossed by many brothers and sisters. The questions themselves reflect the location of consciousness. There is no need to feel guilty or responsible for it, but to enlighten it in every possible way. That is what is being done right now. The truth of the essence found, the oath and the promise, lived in its entirety right here through this character, cannot leave room for any doubt, any interrogation, any question. Only laughter takes up all the space. Even if there is vision, even if there is explanation, it means nothing to the one who is freed from consciousness. You cannot free yourself from consciousness, you cannot free yourself from superconsciousness or vibration. Thus, the oath and promise cannot yet be lived. But precisely, it is through what is positioned, in the questioning posed, and in the questioning that arises to you and that you translate into these words, which shows you that you can only smile at yourself, because there is still you and the other, because there is still you and Christ, and therefore you cannot be the way, the truth and the life, because you are simply still your life, in fragmented consciousness, not seeing or living the uniqueness. This uniqueness does not need to be seen, nor even to be known, it needs to be actualized by the lived, by the transcendence of the resurrection, by the sacrifice, that is, by the gift and acceptance. There is no other alternative, nor any other possibility than that of acquiescing to life, of acquiescing to love, beyond any form or world. Acquiescence will allow your consciousness to naturally reposition itself, regardless of your will, desires or goals, in order to make you grasp, through experience and the journey itself, that everything is already actualized and that you have never moved. Thus, you leave the dream, not by the lighting of the light, conceived and seen as external to yourself and illuminating any scene of lived theater or any story, be it the most prestigious, but you observe, during this crossing, that history is you, and that you are the whole of consciousness. It cannot be explained in words, it can be crossed, it can be lived. But as long as you believe you're a person attending a story, as long as you seek the slightest state, you are no longer in the eternal present instant where beatitude reigns supreme. You're in questioning, you're in moving from the 0 point, and you are no longer in your eternity. I reassure you, it is precisely this kind of questioning, whatever the vibrations that may have been experienced, whatever the states or experiences that may have been seen, it represents nothing compared to the naked truth, that makes you descend from your spiritual pedestal and brings you back to your simplest, most childlike, most spontaneous and most natural humanity. Everything else is nothing but procrastination, a kind of dialogue between eternity and the ephemeral, simply reflecting the different positions of consciousness today, given that there is only love or suffering. From the moment you break this natural balance that is revealed and manifested from everywhere, it only results in suffering. This suffering disappears by itself as soon as you reinstate yourself, through experience and learning, in the present instant and in its eternity. At that moment, the weight of history no longer represents anything, the weight of the person no longer represents anything, there is only this great silence, there is only the truth of love, which can be translated in countless ways, whether on your social networks, or during your encounters, and in a totally spontaneous way within nature, quite simply by accepting to live. As long as there is the slightest opposition inside you to what is seen on the world screen, in its illusion and hardness, as long as you are hooked by it, it resonates in you on a lack of freedom, and therefore on suffering. Truth is freedom, truth is smile, truth is love, it has no use for stories, it has no use for Christ, it has no use for ABBA, it has no use for anyone. Because truth does not need a scenario, truth does not need a format, that is what you are, in truth, and beyond any form, as beyond any world. Accepting this is already living it, because the barrier between the ephemeral and the eternal, as you know, between the interior and the exterior, due to the very fusion of the thes, no longer exists. There are simply habits that, if I can put it that way, are freewheeling and are not seen, because they are precisely automatic. These reflexes are extremely important, not only in everyday life habits, but also in what could be called spiritual habits, adherence to stories, scenarios, or anything that happens, not in the moment, but in the future. Liberation is in the present instant, it is not even in a collective event that is inscribed. Today, the light asks you more and more to observe what is happening in each of you, in your anger, in your joys, in your sorrows, in your sufferings. You do not need to see beyond this world, beyond yourselves, because everything is inscribed in you, and that is what you must see, before you see the beauty of the worlds, before you live it even without vision. It is from this acceptance that you demonstrate to yourself that you need neither history, nor time, nor space, and that you realize that you simply need to be present here and now, in order to live the ether that translates into this naked joy, which is neither feigned, nor the result of circumstances, but which is the strict truth of what is experienced by all brothers and sisters who, in their words, whatever their countries, have already expressed for many years, decades, this ineffable truth which is combined between being and non-being. Silence. Then we have a testimony and at the same time a question. Testimony. The testimony concerns yesterday. During the 5 a.m. resonance, in my heart, I was lying down when both my feet and legs got agitated, with very strong needles hitting my feet. A few moments later came an image of an orchid and then the image of the yin-yang symbol. I noticed that this symbol recalls in the whale's colors its white and black. Question. My question is, what is the meaning of the killer whale with the yin-yang symbol, and what is the message? Beloved, the killer whale belongs to the cetacean family, but it eats other cetaceans. It is the symbol of life that is incarnated in the heart of every world, not only in this world still enclosed for a short time, but also in every world. to be dependent on an even free framework, to be dependent on an even adaptable form to the dimensions crossed, identifies consciousness somewhere with the experimentation that is underway, and therefore with the dream of creation. The OK brings you back to the inexorability of manifestation, in the sense that, as soon as there is manifestation, there is ephemeral and there is a crossing, between what is inscribed between the birth of the body and the death of the form, and this whatever the dimensions, even the most subtle. Even if the begetting of a totally free form does not depend on any external authority or assistance, named, for example, father-mother in this world, it is simply a question of vibratory codings, adapting to a given vibratory code, in a given dimension, allowing to take a given appearance, in resonance with the environment and the elements constituting the dimension. However, within the free worlds, this form, in its appearance as in its disappearance, cannot be called neither birth nor death. Of course, in this enclosed world as in everything that is carbonized, even free, there is appearance and disappearance, but there is never forgetting, that is to say, there is never in truth birth, and in truth, there is never death, but simply adaptation to a created form. The form actually lived as you conceive it here on this world, as simply a vehicle, a bicycle, a car, a boat which, when it is worn out, you simply change it, because between the two there is no forgetting, between the two there is no expense, between the two there is no effort. This is the free experience that does not take place in another place, or even at another time, but is combined here in the present instant. The OK simply means the inexorability of yin and yang, death and birth within that which is amputated at truth, within that which is amputated at freedom of being and freedom of non-being. Since there is no time or space, and this is the truth experienced by those who settle in Agape or Agape, it is obvious that you are shown here, through the process you have experienced at the level of your body, an important rise of the wave of life, which makes you discover life right here in these cycles, through death and birth. You discover that beyond death and birth, there is that which is never born and which can never die, whether within a form or outside all forms, that I remind you, that you have been, that you are and that you will be, according to the linear perspective of this world, but which, in the end and in truth, is part of the same time and space of the so-called 0 point, or what you could still call the black hole, from your point of view. Thus, then, the symbol given to you is the inexorable duality of the manifestation, locked or free, even if it is informed of what it really is, that is, simply a vehicle sheltering a free consciousness. You are therefore shown the incessant cycle and the incessant struggle of life and death within the confinement, but also within the appearance of any manifestation as well as any dimension, if only in the free worlds, there is no subjection to a form and a total freedom of consciousness. But this consciousness has an origin. It is at the level of a consciousness, of the one consciousness called the Source, deployed and multiplied to infinity, having resulted in an inescapable fragmentation, as if the pieces of the one consciousness had been dispersed as in the founding myths of Isis and Osiris, where there made the same dispersion. Today, it is exactly the same. There is no question of putting all the pieces back together again, because they will stick together again by themselves, as soon as you yourself have seen that you were one of these fragments inscribed very internally to the inexorable duality of appearance and disappearance. For what has never been born and that you are in truth, does not have to appear or disappear, but simply to stand in the evidence of joy, in the evidence of truth. What has been shown to you is nothing more than what happened in your legs, embodied in your flesh. Combining the two in one at the leg level is very simple. Your body is the resonator, it is then enough to cross your ankles in any direction, to observe the unification of your consciousness and the crossing of any vision, any perception, as well as any vibration, bringing you as close as possible to the heart, as close as possible to the 0 moment, and as close as possible to this crossing, which is only a gift and permanent acceptance in the two complementary movements of life, appearance and disappearance. If you stand there, simply by being beyond all claims, as beyond all beings and non-believers, by letting life live and pass through you, then you understand that you are not any person, neither the smiling one, nor the one who questions you in front of you, but that you are both as one and the other, but much more than that, between one and the other and between the other and the other. You are from everywhere, for you are the content and substance, and the essence of love itself, whether it is here, through this body and its suffering, through the screen of this world, for thus is the illumination of the truth that opens, no shadows, no distortion, everything must be enlightened, everything is enlightened. And each one illuminates his own scene of life in the way that is most suited to the intelligence of light. Whatever he says, whatever he has to say, whatever is his fault, whatever he accepts or refuses. It does not change anything, whether it is perceived, experienced or not, because it is the ineffable reality of these moments that become collective and more evident, even through unbelief, even through misunderstanding, even through gesticulation, and even through any refusal. Because the intelligence of light through your body of eternity is omnipresent. Whatever you do and whatever you say, you cannot preserve yourself from it, you cannot escape it, you cannot evade it, you can only recognize the laughter and smile of joy. If this is not true today, and if it puts you in even greater resistance, then you are closer and closer to it. For even resistance consumes itself by the effect of Agape, by the effect of the resonance of the intelligence of the Christic light on all interactions, on all these visions, even at the level of what you call virtual or social networks. Silence. Question. What is the current way of making a decision or choice? The winks of life, the heart's response or listening after activating the star's clarity, precision and depth. Beloved, you're revoking here a certain number of teachings and learning experiences that have already been lived for many years concerning what the commander of the ancients had called the response of the heart, by the vibration, by the evidence and the ease of unity as well. Today, it is important to understand that as long as you think about having to choose, as long as you think about having activated certain star functions, or certain spiritual functions, well, you are not quite in the rightness of freedom. For he who lives life never has to choose. The circumstances of his own life as well as the circumstances of the life that is lived and crossed, led him to no longer ask himself questions and especially, in what is misunderstood, but he never has a choice, because everything happens naturally. True freedom is there, it is not to have the choice, it is not to see what is right or wrong, what is true or not, but to walk without stopping, to stop walking, that is, to live in the instant moment, to embrace what is happening and the path reveals itself and illuminates itself. It does not result from a conscious choice or decision. Because as long as you think you have to choose, or as long as you think you have to decide, freedom is not total. But even these choices and decisions led you to discover this total freedom, the one where the evidence of the light leads your life so that you are no longer your life, but this life that depends neither you, nor on the world, in some obligation, in some moral or in some impression of choice. This too corresponds to the notion of giving and embracing what is, even if there are very laudable intentions, and observing what is happening. Life is not your choices, but it is the choices of life. They have nothing to do with you, they have nothing to do with your logic, they have nothing to do with choosing what is fairest or most unfair, but to accept and embrace in the same way what may seem totally unfair to you with the same smile. You cannot force yourself to do this, you cannot decide for yourself, but you live it or not, but in any case, it will become clearer and clearer there too, with more and more evidence. As always, it is you who decide to place yourself where the evidence is or where you are. You have no way, by the intelligence of the light, to obtain or choose, but simply to let yourself be, to let yourself give, to let yourself be given, to receive that gift and to be the gift, to embrace as you embrace in the same way what is happening on the screen of the world, without having to decide, to choose. This is how gift and acceptance are created, this is how truth is created and not by any decision, even the most just or the most harmful for you, because it is ultimately always you, even with the vibration of your heart, who decide. Today, it is necessary to see, accept and verify by yourselves that it will never be a decision by vibration, but simply the unconditional surrender to life, no longer being a person, in order to be nothing, in order to be everything, and especially in order to be true, not with yourselves, nor with this world, but with the love that you are who know no world. There is therefore an evidence and a naturalness that emerges, from the very moment when you accept not to want to decide, not to be able to choose, but simply to accept the choice of the light, to accept what life gives you to live or takes away from you, with the same smile and the same evidence. That is the true sacrifice, that is the truth, it is nowhere else. So therefore, as long as it seems to you to hesitate, the fluidity of unity, the fluidity of life, is not yet fully manifested. It is also appropriate for you to simply enlighten it, to accept to see it, and to see if it is followed by effect, as soon as you reposition your consciousness within the heart of acceptance and gift, and not in the claim of a decision, even of a spiritual function called the star, even the vibration of your heart. I would say that in short, the answer is no longer vibratory, it is simply, I am light or I lose my lightness, I am laughter or laughter goes out. This is the choice, because you will notice that as soon as the smile seems to you to be chosen more easily, without reluctance and without explanation, then this smile can only grow, freedom can only manifest itself, putting an end to the illusion of being a person in this world, of accomplishing a journey, of living certain visions and accomplishing certain things. You'll see, as ABBA said, not only the theatre scene, not only the actor, not only the observer, but you will see that indeed, really and concretely, there has never been theatre, and that you are only playing a score that has already been written and lived forever within your eternity. It is really a form of unlocking the illusion of having to play a role, of having to accomplish certain things, but rather of letting oneself be accomplished by the intelligence of the light, of letting oneself be revealed in Hellenes, without resistance and without opposing any story, any scenario, any future or any person. In the end, you can only laugh, realizing that there has never been anyone, that it only passes. At that moment, no suffering can remain, no pain can affect you, no vision, no world, no projection into any future. The true agape is that, it has been called naked love, unconditional love, but it is much more this evidence that I have just described to you, which is imposed and lived every minute. As long as this is not lived, you are not yet completely free, you feel the perfume of freedom, you have approached it, but there are still elements of reticence, elements of resistance, over which you have no power except to let them be illuminated by the light that you are. This is what puts an end to all duality, this is what puts an end to all suffering and all illusion. And that is when you enter into the resonance of the dance of freedom as explained by PALMA yesterday, the great dance of silence, the great evidence and great joy. So, at that moment, you fully accept to be the character on the stage, you fully accept to be the observer, you fully accept to be the whole theatre scene, because you know and you really live that it is only a game and that every game is written between a beginning and an end, but that you were simply the actor or the observer and that you yourself created the theatre. It is at this moment that true freedom appears, and not in the observation of the simulacrum of this world. Some of you, having made the connection between the sacred and the simulacrum, spontaneously manage to laugh and play with the circumstances of this world. This laughter is neither mockery, nor laughter, it is not an accusation, but rather the burst of laughter of the intelligence of the light that illuminates the entire stage of the show. You are neither the actor, nor the player, you are not even the theatre stage, you predate that, and it is when you live that this great burst of laughter, this great evidence, this great silence is revealed to you. And the words as you use them, as Fadiam said, become the bearers of joy, in any word or expression, as in any gaze you take on your own sufferings, as when you accept the suffering of one who believes himself to be yet another, and even and especially for one who calls himself an enemy or who opposes himself. The result will always be a smile. If there is no smile, then there is no truth. the smile becomes permanent, whether it is on the face you wear in this world, whether it is inside you, everything is just a smile, everything else is part of what happens. And the more eternity sets in, through the intelligence of the light, the way, the truth and the life that you are Christ, you're ABBA, but above all you're beyond any form, as beyond any scenario. Those who live it can only testify to this laughter and smile in every circumstance of life, in every glance and in every scene played on the screen of this world. Whether it is your individual screen or the collective screen, nothing can be taken seriously, because life is anything but serious. It is joy, it is spontaneity, but it is not in the role plays, actors, spectators or even the one who refutes. Everything has allowed you to achieve this, all this is enlightened, even your questions say so and the answers emerge on their own. I'm only giving a few words that allow this answer to come to light in you. It was the same for your countless testimonies throughout these months, which allowed you to resonate with each other. Whether it is a resonance of sympathy, empathy, or a resonance of opposition, it doesn't matter, because there is only one winner, and that is love. Silence. So, another question that is more of a form of comment and request. In a way, it's quite long. Testimony. I'm on social networks, surrounded by people who live on not Agape, but are sensitive to it in one way or another. Many beautiful photos, images of hearts, beautiful texts and so on. A lot of love and I love it. But as soon as I leave this cocoon network, I don't notice any change. People are still as aggressive, selfish, with violent words and violent actions. Away from the Agape, lived here between us. Between the words of ABBA, FAM and what is happening around me there are two, I would say, speech, sometimes making me doubt a lot about the veracity of ABBA's words. So yes, it's falling apart, but no more or no less than a few years ago. The same people are still there governing us, and people are still as naive in their reactions. Often I think to myself, observing, but how is everyone going to get there? It's going to take a big boom, because I don't see how else it could happen. Natural disasters, there have always been some, the internet simply makes them more visible than before. The economy is about cycles, finance is about more cycles. Young people seem to be sinking even deeper into social networks and violent games, becoming autistic. What does TV offer us today, which I haven't watched for a long time? Dumbfounding shows, pseudo-stars without any interest, more and more revered, people live in systematic competition, walking or dying, people empty and even more empty. So, when I hear that it's now, the now has been going on for several years, anyway, I don't believe it or no longer do. And sometimes I think to myself, are you crazy or what? You're on Earth, incarnate. And so you have to stay in this game. How are you going to pay all this bullshit? Anyway, since the end of December, I am no longer connected to what I am in all eternity and truth. So yes, the last ones will be the first, but the last ones who should be the first are far, very far from reaching the front, Actually, it's not a question, it's a testimony. Agape, even if I don't see it. Beloved, you're only expressing the oscillations and the comings and goings between freedom, the lived communion, the Agape resonances, and what persists within, as you say so well, this world so illusory, so cruel and so detestable. And yet, that's exactly what you have to go through and accept, that's what you have to do, as you say so well, also play, accepting without stopping anything. But remember that as it has been said and as countless brothers see it once they've crossed, that it is precisely by being in this place that seems to you to be terrible, that you can discover the smile. Vibration is a process. Being in the cocoon, as you say, whether it is virtual or real, does not change anything effectively, as long as you have not recognized yourself in this, rather than in this character who pays his bills, who sees the difficulty of this world. This was called the point of view many years ago, and through your questioning witnessing, there is obviously the point of view of the person. That you live it, that you say it. What prevents you from letting yourself go through, from playing this game, but not being the one who plays the game, but the one who sees the game? Because you see it, because you experienced certain vibratory processes many years ago, today you seem to have this cocoon, as you say, created on the virtual network, but also between brothers and sisters who know each other within the flesh, who had met each other, whether it is several years ago, whether it is more recently. They live this joy and you do not live it. This creates, as you say, resistance and suffering. But it is these resistances and sufferings that are in their right place, which allow you to enlighten the person you believe you are and the truth that you nevertheless consider illusory. It is up to you to see what makes you light. Does the fact of running after the payment of your bills, of wanting to install security from now on through a gate that is being lived, make you free? Freedom does not depend on any bills, freedom does not depend on any person, even ABBA, even Christ, even Mary, even Buddha. Freedom depends only on one thing, on itself, and not on you, and not on the world. Many elders have spoken of this freedom since time immemorial. Many brothers and sisters really live it in totality and in truth. They have testified to this, whether through writings, whether it is indeed through these virtual cocoons, as you describe it and as you experience it at times. It is up to you to be that every minute of your life, even in the circumstances of this world. So, therefore, I can only translate, as you say, and live it, a form of tearing, a form of dichotomy between being, between life and between your life. As long as it is not seen as the same resonance and experience, then there is distance and there can be no evidence. The sacrifice, the gift and the embrace, is not made. Because the very word you use through what is right in this world, the dullness of the world, the sinking into pedostatism and image, is very real. And it is through this, however, through this violent light that was not previously seen by all humanity, that love is discovered. This is what you have to go through, this kind of apparent darkness that is only a reflection of yourself and that makes you reject in the distance everything you have lived in the past, everything you still live today within your ephemeral, which is not magnified nor yet sufficiently enlightened, because if it were sufficiently enlightened, then all this would be consumed in a great burst of laughter, in a great burst of joy. There is no judgment in these words, there is nothing to judge, as long as you think you have to judge the intensity of the theatre scene, of the simulacrum that takes place there, that are indeed and will in any case be more and more pronounced, more and more believed, and even for violence, in the end, it only leads to love. This you cannot see, you cannot accept, from the moment you dwell within the person. All that may seem to you to be an obstacle, in the end, is only for you, the elements of resilience that will become clearer as the days and hours go by, whatever you say and even if you oppose it, because any opposition to the truth, any opposition to Agape is in vain and only leads to your restitution in what you are. The game was written in advance. It is in this sense that I often say that it is not only a theatre scene, it is also a simulacrum that similarly connects to the sacred. As I said, simulacrum and sacred are only the two sides of the same coin, that coin that does not exist and that you thought you were. It is at stake in you on a screen of conscience, as you say and testify. It has to be accepted, neither to argue, nor justify, nor even to be debated, nor even to be answered. Because you were the answer, from the moment you saw it. There is the ultimate reversal, the ultimate change of point of view, which is no longer ultimately a point of view linked to a form, a circumstance or a history, but linked to the freedom of life. So it is no longer a point of view, you're all points of view in this, in an indistinct and indifferent way. You're the suffering of the one who dies of hunger, you're the revolt of the one who is on his barricade, you're also the child who suffers from all this, but you are also the child who can only accept reality in order to discover that it is reality, whatever the reality lived. Silence. With regard to all these questions, you can say today that the lighter you are, the lighter it will become, and the harder you are, the lighter it will become. You have no other alternative, you have no challenge that cannot be met, not by you, but by the truth of Agape. It does not depend on ABBA, it does not depend on anyone, because there is no one, if not the truth of the Agape resonance, initiated by FAM, and initiated by each of you. As soon as you agree, as soon as you say yes to life, you are each other, and there is a very basic and very simple arithmetic notion. To each heart that lives the resonance, countless hearts awaken, whether through resistance or violent lighting, whether it is indeed through the increasingly abrupt suffering of this world, in its thirst for freedom expressed on the theatre screen. In short, whatever the scene that is played, whatever is accepted, whatever is refused, the gift and acceptance of the sacrifice of resurrection and revelation, leads to the apotheosis of the apocalypse. It is at this very moment, and you are never so close to it, that even in the most fierce and total denial, for this is how you consume your intimate resistances, because this is how unconscious reticences are consumed by the joy and bliss of love. Whatever you do, whatever you say, whatever your actions, whatever your non-actions, they systematically lead, as you will see, for you individually, but also for the collective, to the same truth, to the burning of love, to the event and to freedom. Everything else is just passing through. This is what you simply have to accept, this is what you have to go through, without asking yourself any questions, opening yourself to life and truth, which do not depend on any question or positioning of your person, even in the most personal questions of choice and decision, as I have explained and as I have especially tried to prepare you to live it, as well as to live it at every instant. Evidently, within social networks, as well as within our physical encounters, there are resonance elements that affect not only the group, not only the virtual network, but the whole of creation. It cannot be otherwise, and the innumerable proofs will be given to us in a natural way every day, whether through your measuring instruments in what can be measured, for the more you will grow in what cannot be measured or limited, in this agape, in this naked love, the more spontaneously joy grows, the more excessive the measures touch. This has never been seen before this earth, and it is becoming a reality every day. So, either you look at what is measurable and objectifiable at the level of love, even within its manifestation in this world, or you look at the screen of the world as the screen of your little life, where everything will only be despair, where everything will only be suffering, but these are the two sides of the same coin. There is no longer any distance, there is no longer any separation. This is what you're experiencing in every possible way, in every scene you experience, in every virtual or real encounter that takes place, in everything that happens, even in the most insignificant event of your life, the most everyday and ordinary. This is what frees you and not the world's screen. So after that, whether it is simulacrum or observed, what is observed no longer leads to a change in the state of joy, no longer leads to an imbalance in zero time, and no longer leads to the reappearance of any character, scenario, becoming or vision. Silence. It is no longer time to do anything but celebrate. Of course, the celebration is much easier, as we saw in the last testimony, through the virtual cocoon, or the cocoon of the encounter of flesh. But it is you who have not yet seen that these cocoons are from everywhere, and that this cocoon is the whole of creation and not circumstantial to events, even the most prodigious, and not circumstantial to some virtual cocoon or some real cocoon. The cocoon is the whole creation. Do not set limits. Do not put barriers, because they no longer exist. They are only in your reticence, they are only in your habits and in what you still refuse to give in to, that is, the truth of life, the truth of love. You can't acquire anything from who you already are. And you can't exceed anything on your own. Surpassing is done by itself, by the intelligence of the light, by the intelligence of love, which is, I remind you, natural and principle. Let me now establish myself in resonance, beyond any identity, beyond any scenario and beyond any distance. Silence. I'm you as you are me, beyond me and beyond you. Goodbye. Through Jean-Luc Ayoun. Les Transformations. Transcription into French. Agape Team. English translation. LMF.